We weren't here in the intervening time. We were in the August recess. This is happening. So I don't want to debate, particularly next year. We need a vote next week because of that timetable, which is not of my making. But I appreciate the sentiment of the senator from New Hampshire. I look forward to working this out in that way.
Mr. President, will my colleague yield for a question? Senator Vitter, I appreciate that the consent agreements are usually worked out by the leadership of both the majority and the minority. I know you understand that, too. Would you be willing to withdraw your objection to moving forward on amendments on the bill if you and I went together in good faith to the majority leader and the minority leader to see if we could get some agreement on when we could address your issue?
I would not agree to that because that discussion in good faith has been going on for a long time, and it's not yielding anything, so I hope it does. But simply put, I can't take the pressure off that discussion to yield something because that discussion has been going on for a long time. And so I'm happy to continue that discussion. But moving forward with the bill, quite frankly, lets all the pressure out and assures defeat, assures lack of progress.
But would you not agree there are other bills that are going to be coming to the Senate in the next couple of weeks? And so if we can't come to an agreement, that there's going to be another opportunity before the deadline when you could also have this debate that you're looking for?
Well, again, answering the question through the chair, I would just observe that the time between now and October 1st is pretty darn short. And what may be coming to the floor is pretty limited. It may be a CR. The amendment opportunities on that are very uncertain. I know there are nominations that are moving forward with obviously no amendment opportunities. So, number one, I don't know what other bills there may be to even try to get an amendment on. But number two, even if I knew of those targets, I wouldn't be assured of a vote. I would just be put off some more. So, again, I'm open to any solution that guarantees a vote, not for me, but for the American people on this important issue before October 1st. And again, that timeline was not of my making. It was due to the issuance of what I think is a clearly illegal rule to benefit Washington, contrary to the statutory language of Obamacare.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I have been watching with admiration the work done by my colleague from New Hampshire and Ohio, Senators Shaheen and Portman, and I would suggest in all respect to colleagues who may have extraneous amendments that this measure is so important and so vital to the future of our country, not only in the ends and policies it achieves, but also the trust that it will inspire. If we're able to come together and work on a bipartisan basis and get this job done, it can set a template for changing the mindset within this building and across the country as to how Congress can function. And so we have an opportunity here. Let's seize it. Let's avoid the kind of quagmire and gridlock and paralysis that has been so damaging to trust and confidence in our public institutions. Senators Shaheen and Portman deserve a tremendous amount of credit for getting this bill to where it is right now. They never gave up, and I am proud that they have come this far. Let us enable this Congress to go the rest of the way. This legislation is more than the sum of its parts. It is about saving money, clearly $13.7 billion per year. It's about saving energy and creating jobs, 164,000 jobs by 2030. And it is a great return on investment. It's also about creating trust and confidence in our ability to protect our national security from excess use of energy that makes us more dependent on nations that have no particular affection for us, indeed wish us more harm than good. This legislation authorizes $10 million in grants for institutions of higher learning, trade schools, and community colleges to provide workforce training and skill creation to engineers and builders who need to develop and install the latest, most cutting-edge technologies. It provides limited but very helpful rebates of up to $20 million over the next 2 years for manufacturers who upgrade their electric motors and transformers. It directs the Department of Energy to focus its ongoing research and development offices on alternative energy sources for our heating and power. These measures, along with energy efficiency required in our federal buildings and facilities, are meaningful and real. They are perhaps not the biggest steps, but they are important steps in the right direction toward saving energy, saving money, and ultimately saving our planet, because we know that climate change, more properly known as climate disruption and planet destruction, are facing us if we fail to act as this measure would have us do. I have an amendment to the bill that would provide for very straightforward, non-controversial steps in this same direction. It's numbered 1878, and it would require the United States Department of Energy to study the non-monetary, I stress non-monetary benefits to our communities of energy-saving products and complying with energy codes for buildings. For example, buildings account for almost 40% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, according to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We all see the difference that energy efficiency makes in our pocketbooks and wallets. This amendment will help quantify these same improvements insofar as a cleaner environment and energy saving contributes in non-monetary ways to our quality of life, making us more efficient in the workplace because the workplace's quality of life is improved and conditions make people more productive. There are other amendments, such as the fine work done by my colleague, Senator Bennett of Colorado, to get a better understanding of the financial, that is the monetary savings, that commercial energy-efficient buildings generate for both owners and tenants. My amendment looks to the non-monetary benefits, seeking to quantify them and build a case for energy efficiency there and throughout our society insofar as we work better, enjoy life more from savings that this bill may achieve in money and energy. As chair of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Oversight, Federal and Agency Actions, I've seen how federal agencies are able, through the rulemaking process, to take into account the non-monetary factors during their cost-benefit analysis. And so, too, should consumers and manufacturers have a better understanding of non-monetary factors that are addressed through energy efficiency, such as improved building codes that benefit occupants and the general population, as well as greater office productivity. There are 3 areas of manufacturing in Connecticut that are thriving because of energy efficiency. United Technologies makes building systems, elevators, and heating and air conditioning units and systems that are focused on the most innovative and sustainable technologies. We all use their energy efficiency. For example, Otis elevators every day and come to the Senate floor to bring constituents to the Capitol Visitor Center by that means. At LeGrand in West Hartford, if you visit, you can see firsthand the jobs this legislation supports. LeGrand employs about 500 people, making the electrical and digital insides of buildings across commercial, industrial, and residential markets. They have a demonstration home. You can walk through it. You can see how energy-efficient products work and how they save energy, money, and also improve quality of life. This past May, LeGrand was recognized by the United States Department of Energy for its continuing efforts in making energy efficiency a top priority through that company's involvement in Better Buildings, Better Plants Challenge. Connecticut is also leading the world in making energy-efficient fuel cell and hydrogen energy systems, a third area of great importance in energy savings. From our neighborhood schools to military bases that use stationary fuel cells to many other areas where inexpensive energy storage and power, as well as increased reliability, result from grid independence. These lessons are tangible, real, dramatic. They are lessons in energy efficiency. In fact, after Storm Sandy, we know something about the need for reliable backup power in Connecticut. Fuel cells are our future, and we should be recognizing that energy efficiency is our future as well. It's an investment that helps everyone in all communities. I've long supported making energy efficiency more supportable, affordable, reliable by improving the existing and new technologies. And since arriving in the Senate, I have fought for continued adequate funding for weatherization assistance programs. A comprehensive energy strategy is what the nation needs. This measure is a step in that direction. We cannot live successfully, and we cannot thrive as a nation in the 21st century without an energy policy and without moving forward on measures like this one that enable us to be more energy efficient. This legislation is an important approach and a part of a comprehensive policy that our nation needs to address climate disruption, national security threats, fiscal austerity, and all of the challenges of quality of life that are so imminent and direct to our nation. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I really appreciate my colleague from Connecticut's work. I will add his amendment number 1878 to my proposed UC. I absolutely support it being fully debated and having a vote. I have absolutely no problem with that. Alternatively, I have no problem withdrawing my amendment from this bill and getting a vote subsequent to this bill before October 1st. And certainly, down that path as well, the Blumenthal Amendment number 1878 should get a vote. So I fully support that. And finally, Mr. President, I absolutely agree with the need to build the confidence of the American people. But let me just suggest, I don't think the way to build the confidence of the American people is by passing some Energy Efficiency Act, which I expect to support but they've never heard of, and sweeping under the rug and thereby protecting this special deal and special Washington exemption from Obamacare. I think step one of rebuilding the confidence of the American people is to say and to live the motto that everything that we pass and apply to America has to apply in the same way to us. And that's exactly what this illegal OPM rule goes against and disrupts. There is a statutory provision in Obamacare that specifically says all members of Congress and all congressional staff have to go to the exchange. This OPM rule completely, effectively reverses that, takes all the sting out of that, is contrary to the law and therefore illegal. And I think letting that stand, ignoring that or sweeping that under the rug is no way to build the confidence of the American people. And so I want to do both things. I want to address that, and I want to debate and vote on this bill and all these amendments, certainly including Blumenthal Amendment number 1878, which I will certainly add to my proposed UC. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut.
I want to thank my colleague and friend from Louisiana for his support for my amendment and say that I respect and appreciate the passion and zeal that he has brought to this debate on behalf of his beliefs. We can disagree on the policies and the merits of those beliefs, but I would just add my voice respectfully to other colleagues who have suggested there may be other ways to raise this issue and indeed have a vote. And like my colleague from New Hampshire, who has just articulated it so well, I would in no way shirk from votes on the issues that my colleague, the senator from Louisiana, has raised. I am ready to debate and confront those issues and deal with the merits. I would simply suggest that there may be better ways to raise this issue than, in effect, to block consideration of a bill that is so important to the American people, so widely supported among so many different groups, and has amassed and mobilized such a strong bipartisan coalition.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
And Mr. President, I'll respond through the chair that I appreciate those remarks and the genuine sentiment behind those remarks, and I welcome and will accept any reasonable path forward that assures that vote before October 1st, which is the deadline established by OPM's illegal rule. I will agree to any path forward that assures that vote before October 1st, absolutely. And I look forward to that. Finally, I'm not blocking anything. I'm proposing votes. I'm proposing making amendments pending. And alternatively, I'm proposing withdrawing my amendment from this bill as long as we can vote before October 1st. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut.
In addition to thanking my colleague from Louisiana for his comments just now, I also have 5 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
The Senate continues in a quorum call. They're working today on an energy efficiency bill co-sponsored by Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat of New Hampshire, and Ohio Republican Rob Portman. A lot of discussion on the floor, too, about the health care law. And over in the House today, they passed a bill which would bar the administration from providing subsidies to help individuals buy insurance under that law until the Health and Human Services Department confirms a income verification plan. That passed in the House. The House is done for the week, although the news out of the House today is they could be in the week of September 23rd, a week they had planned to be out. As still out there is the continuing resolution funding the federal government beyond September 30th, and also negotiations and debate on the debt ceiling. Well, as this quorum call continues, we're going to bring you some coverage from earlier today at the Intelligence Summit in Washington. They heard this morning from the House Intelligence Committee Chairman and Ranking Democrat Dutch Ruppersberger, or Mike Rogers and Dutch Ruppersberger. Will show you what we can as the quorum call continues.
There we go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural INSA-IC Summit. At INSA, our mission is to serve as a catalyst for public, private, and academic partnerships in order to identify, develop, and promote solutions to the national security challenges confronting the intelligence community. I think we can all agree that we have achieved the first part of that mission here at the IC Summit, as we've been able to assemble an audience of more than 500 professionals from across the public, private, and academic sectors, as well as an impressive list of more than 40 panelists and moderators from those same sectors. So I want to thank you all for being with us today. I want to extend a special thank you to all of our sponsors. In particular, I would like to recognize our two host sponsors, Northrop Grumman and Raytheon, for their continued support of our efforts. In addition to our host sponsors, I would like to thank Mantech for sponsoring the breakfast, Deloitte for sponsoring the registration, PwC for sponsoring our Speakers Lounge, BAE Systems for sponsoring our lunch, and Social Intelligence and Eagle Ray for sponsoring the morning and afternoon coffee breaks. Without your support, INSA would not be able to put on events such as this one today. I'd also like to thank our media partner, Defense One, for their support. Will you all please join me in a round of applause for our sponsors? We have a full agenda today. We have over 40 panelists participating across 8 breakout sessions, each on a topic of critical importance to the intelligence community. We have 4 key intelligence community leaders in the persons of Chairman Mike Rogers, who just arrived. Welcome, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Dutch Ruppersberger, DNI James Clapper, who will be with us later in the day, and DIA...
I ask unanimous consent that Anna Henderson, a fellow in my office, be granted floor privileges for
The Senate is in a quorum call presently.
I'm sorry. I would ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you. Madam President, I would ask for unanimous consent that Anna Henderson, a fellow in my office, be granted floor privileges for the remainder of the 113th Congress.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. Madam President, I rise today to talk about energy efficiency and my amendment to Senators Jeanne Shaheen's and Rob Portman's Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act. I'm very pleased that we are acting on this legislation today, and I'm very appreciative of the work of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee Chairman Ron Wyden and Ranking Member Lisa Murkowski that they have done to get us to this point. This is a very important piece of legislation. In the United States, our energy consumption is about 1/5 of the world's total energy consumption, and yet when you consider that we have less than 1/20 of the world's population, that says that we have a role to play here, and especially when a tremendous amount of that energy is simply lost through inefficient buildings, appliances, industrial processes, and automobiles. Those losses have been estimated to cost U.S. businesses and households $130 billion a year. By making investments in energy efficiency, we can help consumers lower energy costs and we can reduce pollution, boost the manufacturing sector, and create jobs. That's win-win-win-win. That's what this legislation is all about, and I am proud that the first hearing I held as chairman of the Energy Subcommittee on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee was on amendments to Senator Shaheen's and Senator Portman's bill. We considered a number of amendments that would bolster the bill's efforts to make our economy more energy efficient. Now we have the opportunity to consider some of those amendments that we addressed in my subcommittee on the floor of the Senate. I would like to call up and briefly talk about an amendment that I've filed to this bill. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to set aside the pending amendment and call up amendment number 1855.
Madam President.
Is there objection?
Madam President, reserving the right to object.
The senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, reserving the right to object, I would like to propose an alternative unanimous consent that would certainly allow that amendment to be made pending. And that would be, Madam President, that I ask unanimous consent that the pending amendment be set aside and the following amendments be made pending. Franken, number 1855. Blumenthal, number 1878. Bennett, number 1847. Enzi, number 1863. Udall, number 1845. Sessions, number 1879. Inhofe, number 1851. Klobuchar, number 1856. And Vitter, number 1866. And then on Tuesday, September 17th, at a time to be determined jointly by the majority and minority leaders, that my amendment, Vitter, number 1866, and a side-by-side amendment on the same subject by the majority leader be made pending and receive 60 minutes of debate, evenly divided and controlled by the majority bill manager and myself, that no points of order be in order in relation to these two amendments, that upon expiration of the time for debate without any intervening motions or debate, the Senate then proceed to votes on these two amendments subject to a 60-vote threshold for passage, and that subsequent to each amendment vote, a motion to reconsider each vote be made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection to the request from the senator from Louisiana?
I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President.
Is there objection to the senator from Minnesota's request?
I object. And Madam President.
Objection is heard. The senator from Minnesota has the floor.
Madam President, I'm disappointed that my colleague is objecting to us moving forward with this energy bill for reasons that I believe are entirely unrelated to this bipartisan piece of legislation, and for an amendment that is not germane. And I hope we can work this out. But in the meantime, I'd like to explain what my amendment does on energy efficiency, which is what this bipartisan bill is about. My amendment is simply designed to help information on the energy use of buildings to get it and to get it out. That way, building owners and private sector companies can identify energy savings. Unless we really know how well buildings are performing, we can't be sure what types of energy efficiency technologies will be the most effective, and that's exactly what my amendment addresses. The main thing my amendment does is to require that building spaces that are leased by the federal government measure and report their energy use. The federal government is the nation's largest consumer of energy. Taxpayers are paying for all of that energy. We owe it to them, to our taxpayers, to make sure that our buildings save as much energy as possible. Now, the Energy Savings and Independence Act of 2007 created energy efficiency requirements for federal buildings and for federally leased spaces. However, over half of those leased spaces are exempt from these energy efficiency requirements. My amendment makes the federal government's energy usage accountable to taxpayers by requiring disclosure of energy use in all federally leased spaces where such disclosures would be practical and appropriate. This amendment will also have a small grant program so that utilities and their partners who want to measure and disclose energy use in their buildings are able to do so. The grant program is voluntary and is fully offset. Madam President, my amendment would be a significant step in making our commercial buildings more energy efficient. I had a call with a member of the Real Estate Roundtable. It's called benchmarking is what this is called. And on that call he was saying, well, not only will this save the federal government money, save taxpayers money, but it will, through the whole commercial building sector, create more energy efficiency and save dollars. And again, make the federal government more accountable to taxpayers. By accessing information on the energy use of buildings, private sector investors and energy service contract companies can identify and deploy more effective energy efficiency retrofit improvements. Retrofits are the win-win-win-win-win-win thing that we can do, and it's low-hanging fruit. When you do a retrofit, you're putting people to work doing the retrofit. You're improving the value of the property. You are using products that are made by manufacturers in the United States, so you're creating jobs there. You're also reducing the amount of energy used, so saving money. Retrofits pay for themselves. It lowers our carbon footprint. And again, saves money. So win-win-win-win-win. Let's do that. Madam President, I again want to commend Senators Shaheen and Portman on their legislation. I look forward to the passage of this common sense amendment, and I would yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Oregon.
Madam President, I strongly support the Franken amendment, and this concept known as benchmarking, and that's what the Senator's amendment's all about, is something of a term of art in the energy field. But I think it's important for people to know that benchmarking is essentially about information. It's about making markets work better. Benchmarking is a process that allows building owners to assess and disclose the energy use of their buildings so they can compare it to similar buildings. The information provides an incentive for owners to improve building efficiency, and obviously better information on energy use is itself an incentive to improve efficiency. And all this amendment does is it expands benchmarking. It in effect, approaches the issue of building efficiency and says one of the most practical, common sense steps that we can take is to expand access to good information. So I'm very appreciative that the senator from Minnesota has offered this amendment. It's very much consistent with what's known as the Energy Star program, which also encourages building owners to share this kind of information. So I hope senators will support it. I'm sure that not every senator has heard the words benchmarking before, because that is something of a term of art in the energy policy field. But to put it in something resembling English, this is about sharing information. It's about making markets work better. There are no mandates or requirements here in terms of the private sector. I'm very hopeful that, again, as part of the effort to keep this bill focused on energy efficiency, we can get the Franken amendment before the entire Senate. I support it strongly, and Madam President would yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Ohio.
I want to thank my colleague from Minnesota for coming down to the floor and talking about his amendment, even though he can't officially offer it, because I think it's an important amendment. I think it improves the legislation. I appreciate the fact that he took the time to figure out how to offset it, because some of the original drafts of the amendment had some authorization without offsets. So this is a deficit-neutral amendment, as I understand it, and we've looked at the offsets, and they look like they are offsets that are consistent with the underlying bill to make sure that we're not adding any burden to the deficit here. But it does make sense. This benchmarking is important. It enables people to see what others are doing, comparing performance to similar buildings. It's invaluable when evaluating the need for upgrades, and particularly in the federal sector, where we don't have necessarily that same motive to be able to, profit motive, to be able to be incentivized to look at those comparable energy efficiency performances. So I like this amendment because it has a sensible approach on benchmarking. It has no mandates on the private sector. It does expand benchmarking from federally owned facilities to federally leased facilities, which is important since we have a number of those around the country. And it also does something I think positive in terms of requiring DOE to study the whole methodology behind benchmarking, which will help not only the federal sector but the private sector. It requires that these methodologies be studied so that cities and states can implement better practices and best practices. So, Madam President, I think this amendment is an example of the 4 other amendments that I see here we've already had good discussion on in the last day, which deal with aspects of energy efficiency that improve the legislation. And again, I thank my colleague from Minnesota for bringing it forward, as others have, Senator Inhofe, Senator Carper, Senator Hoeven, Senator Bennett, Senator Ayotte, Senators Collins, and others over the last 24 hours. And I look forward to getting the amendment actually called up so that we can move forward on this. And I would urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to find a unanimous consent agreement so that we can move forward. It seems to me we're pretty close to that. Having followed the proceedings this morning, it seems like every time we get close, there's another concern that gets raised, and I think we need to figure out how to resolve the health care issue in a way that does permit this chamber to have its voice heard, but then get back to this underlying legislation and to these amendments. This is something we've worked on now for 2.5 years. It's something that I think is the result of the kind of bipartisan effort we ought to be doing around here. How can you find common ground to actually move the country forward on things that help create jobs, help our economy, and make us more competitive as a country, but also have environmental and energy benefits. So with that, I yield back and, again, thank the members who are willing to come down on the floor and talk about some of these amendments, even though we cannot officially offer them at this point. I yield back.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Madam President. And Madam President, I also want to thank my colleague from Minnesota for his work and for this amendment. And I want to underscore that I'm not blocking his amendment. In fact, I presented a UC that makes his amendment pending, assures a debate, and would assure a vote. And I'm completely open to that with regard to that senator's amendment and all the other amendments we're talking about. Alternatively, if it's preferable, earlier, I know the senator from Minnesota wasn't on the floor, and so I don't expect him to know this, but I wanted to underscore earlier I had presented an alternative UC to withdraw my amendment from this bill and be assured of a vote outside of this bill on the Senate floor before October 1st. And of course, that October 1st deadline is real and is important, not created by me, created by this illegal proposed OPM rule. And so that's an alternative path forward that would take my amendment and my proposal completely outside of this bill. And I also offer that UC, and I would re-urge it. And I, too, hope that we're making progress toward that sort of fair resolution. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President.
The senator from South Dakota.
Madam President, I would like to speak to an amendment that's been filed by my colleague from North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, and I expect he'll be here momentarily to speak specifically to his amendment. But it has to do with the Keystone Pipeline. This is an appropriate, I think, opportunity to talk about the energy needs that our country has, the way in which those are being addressed, and we believe that there is a great opportunity for our country to benefit in so many ways from the building of the Keystone Pipeline. Now, obviously, the senator from North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, his state is benefiting enormously from the oil and gas find that they have in their state, lots of energy resources, abundant energy resources, and as typically the case, you've got to have a way in which to get those to the ultimate marketplace. Well, the most efficient way, of course, to do that is through pipelines. And the Keystone Pipeline, which has been proposed now for several years, is a way in which we could move about 830,000 barrels of oil every single day, and that's according to the Department of Energy. Now, not only would this pipeline transport Canadian crude to U.S. markets, but would also benefit oil production from the Bakken Formation and the Upper Great Plains. Now, just to put that figure in perspective, Madam President, 830,000 barrels represents about half the amount that the United States imports from the Middle East each and every day. According to the Department of Energy, much of the U.S. and Canadian oil shipped through this pipeline will be refined at the Gulf Coast refineries and would likely offset heavy crude imports from Venezuela. Keystone XL Pipeline is a $5.3 billion investment. According to the Obama State Department, the pipeline would support 42,000 jobs across the country, and that's over a 1 to 2 year construction period. Approximately 3,900 would be directly employed in construction activities. These jobs would translate into approximately $2 billion in wages and earnings. Keystone XL would also generate much-needed tax revenue in several states, including an estimated $5 billion in additional property taxes throughout the operational life of the pipeline. The Keystone XL pipeline has been under review for now 1,819 days. September 19th will mark the 5-year anniversary of the initial application for the pipeline's presidential permit. 4 environmental reviews have already concluded that the pipeline would not have a significant impact on the environment. 4 environmental reviews, Madam President, to date have come to that conclusion. As President Obama continues to delay, Canada's oil supply is growing by the day and is expected to double by the year 2025. Canadian oil producers are quickly building pipelines to Canada's east and west coast to ship their oil to foreign markets. Meanwhile, reports indicate that we may not get a decision out of this now, out of the administration, until the year 2014. By delaying approval of the pipeline, President Obama is providing China and other nations with an opportunity to outcompete the United States and gain access to Canada's growing oil supply. Senator Hoeven's resolution declares that the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline is in our national interest. And that, Madam President, is what the State Department will have to conclude at the end of this current environmental impact statement process, which is supposed to be wrapped up here in the coming weeks. At that point, Secretary Kerry, the Secretary of State, has 90 days to determine if the pipeline is in our national interest. Now, I would state again, Madam President, this pipeline is going to create jobs, it's going to boost investment, it's going to reduce our dependence on Venezuelan oil, and it will strengthen our relationship with our largest trading partner. Keystone XL pipeline is clearly in our national interests, and I would hope that the United States Senate would go on record to that effect, Madam President. If you think about the impacts that this can have on our economy, on jobs, the impact it can have on reducing that dangerous dependence that we have on foreign sources of energy, this makes all the sense in the world. And I would reiterate what I said earlier, and that is that this has been studied, this has been scrutinized, this has been reviewed now for 5 years. 1,819 days have elapsed since this permit was applied for in the very beginning. 5 years have lapsed, 4 environmental reviews. There is now currently yet another environmental impact study underway, which is supposed to be concluded soon, at the conclusion of which there will be a 90-day period in which the Secretary of State has to make a determination about whether or not the Keystone Pipeline is in our national interest. What this amendment, offered by my colleague from North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, would do is simply put the Senate on the record as saying that the Keystone Pipeline is, in fact, in our national interest. I believe that's a statement that the United States Senate ought to make. We ought to weigh in on this subject, and it's clear from all the economic impacts, clear from the environmental impacts, clear from the need that we have to get away from the dependence that we have on foreign sources of energy, that this is a win-win for Americans. Win-win for American consumers, win-win for American workers who need those jobs, win-win for the American economy and not having to get so much of our oil and our energy supply from outside the United States. And so, Madam President, I would urge my colleagues, and I hope we get this chance as we continue debate on this bill, to discuss this amendment, but also to ultimately vote on it and to declare once and for all the United States Senate that this is, in fact, in the national interest. And I see my colleague from North Dakota, who is the author of this amendment, is here, and I credit him for bringing this amendment to the floor and giving us an opportunity to discuss what I think is a very important issue, not only to his state, to my state, and to the many others that would be impacted directly by this, but to the entire economy in our country. And so I would yield to the senator from North Dakota, who was the author of the amendment.
Madam President.
The senator from North Dakota.
Madam President, I want to thank the esteemed senator from South Dakota for being here and for his comments on this very important issue, and also for being a co-sponsor of this amendment, both now and previous amendments that I've submitted in support of the Keystone XL pipeline project. And I believe some of the other sponsors of this amendment will be joining us, and I will ask that they are able to say a few words as well as they appear. But again, I want to thank the senator from South Dakota for his leadership on this issue. The pipeline will actually go through part of South Dakota. I should mention that it wasn't too long ago. I was back home in North Dakota and down in the southwest corner of our state, and hundreds of miles of pipeline are stacked up just waiting to be used, to be put in the ground. And a lot of that pipeline will go through the state of South Dakota, through the western part of your state. And, of course, this is all about building vital infrastructure for our nation. What it's really about is getting our nation to energy independence, working with Canada to have North American energy independence so that we no longer depend on oil from the Middle East, and that's something that all Americans very, very much want. And so, as the senator from South Dakota said, this is a joint resolution, a concurrent resolution of the Senate, and then, of course, it would go to the House. So it would be putting both the Senate and the House on record together, stating specifically and clearly that the Keystone XL pipeline project is in the national interest. It is in the national interest. Why is that important? Because, quite simply, that's the decision that our president needs to make. Now, he's been reviewing this project for 5 years. TransCanada submitted an application to build this pipeline in September of 2008. Now it's September of 2013, so for 5 years, this has been under review and under study. So what's the decision for the President of the United States? The decision for the President of the United States is that
he needs to determine, is this pipeline in the national interest or not? Why is that important? Because it crosses an international boundary. The pipeline starts in Hardisty, which is in Alberta, Canada, and it travels down to the Canadian border and then across our country to our refineries, to a variety of refineries across the country. It would provide 830,000 barrels a day of oil, but that's not just Canadian oil. That's also oil from the great state of North Dakota and Montana, more than 100,000 barrels a day of the lightest, sweetest crude oil produced anywhere in the country, really, in the world. And it takes it to our refineries so that our consumers can use that refined fuel from Canada and from the United States rather than what? Rather than oil from the Middle East. How fitting is it that we're here today while we're talking about the Middle East and Syria, and we're today now talking about an energy efficiency bill, and I'll submit to you it is a lot more efficient to move oil in a pipeline than it is by trains and trucks. So it's certainly appropriate that this amendment be part of an energy efficiency bill, but Americans don't want to get their oil from the Middle East anymore. That's a no-brainer. They don't want to get oil from the Middle East. They want it produced here, and they want to work with our closest friend and neighbor, Canada. And that's what this project is all about. So we figure if Congress can go on the record together, the Senate and the House together, just go on the record stating clearly, simply, and straightforwardly, after more than 5 years of study, exhaustive environmental impact statements, we are stating this pipeline is in the national interest. It's in the national interest because we want the jobs. It's in the national interest because we want the energy. It's in the national interest because it will create tremendous economic activity, tax revenue without raising taxes for our country, for the states. It's in the national interest because of our national security. We don't want to have to go to Venezuela or to the Middle East for our oil. We can produce it here, and we can work with Canada to produce that oil. So by clearly stating in a joint resolution, in a concurrent resolution to the Senate and the House that this is in the national interest, we believe that we can get the President to say after 5 years of study, after environmental impact statement after environmental impact statement that shows no significant environmental impact, they don't make a decision. They don't make a decision.
Will the Senator from North Dakota yield for question?
And the decision is to approve the project, and I would be pleased to yield to my distinguished colleague from South Dakota.
I would ask the Senator from North Dakota, and he has been a great leader on this and on all these energy issues as we debate energy policy here in the United States Senate. But my understanding is that according to the State Department, President Obama's State Department, that the pipeline would support 42,000 jobs across the country. Now, there have been some discussions and debates. The President, not too long ago, made some comment in front of an editorial board in one of the country's major newspapers that this is only going to create maybe a couple thousand jobs, and that was a very minimalist thing. And it strikes me, at least, that when you have an unemployment rate that continues to hover in the 7.5% range, you have the lowest labor participation rate in our country today that we've had literally in 35 years. You have to go back to the Carter administration. And the real unemployment rate, in other words, those who are not only unemployed, but those who would like to be working full-time or to be forced to work part-time, or those who have quit looking, is actually much higher, about 14%, about 22 million Americans who fall into that category, that you would be very interested in anything that would create shovel-ready jobs. We've heard from this administration, particularly when we were debating the stimulus, that we need shovel-ready jobs. We need jobs that we can get people to work immediately. Well, this is exactly what fits that description, fits it perfectly. And I would ask the Senator from North Dakota if it's his understanding as well that it actually is thousands of jobs that would be created as a result of building the pipeline, and wouldn't that be something that we would add to the argument? There are many arguments, but this certainly is one when we're talking about a sluggish economy where growth continues to hover in that 1% to 2% range, to get the economy growing and expanding again. Not only do you get the immediate construction jobs, but when you're producing energy in this country and lowering the cost of energy because we're actually having more of it produced here as opposed to importing it from somewhere else around the world, that it gives us a competitive advantage. And it is good for economic growth and good for job creation. But could the Senator from North Dakota speak to that issue of jobs and what his understanding is in terms of the jobs that perhaps could be created if, in fact, we did move forward with the pipeline?
Madam President.
The Senator from South